What role do you see Vietnam American Holocaust playing in relationship to women soldiers, in relationship to the current struggle? Why is it important for us to remember that struggle and remember what actually happened in Vietnam?
Well, I think it's very important to learn from history. I don't think the American public learned the lesson of Vietnam. If the American public would have learned the lessons of Vietnam, we wouldn't be in Iraq. So that's very important.
I agree.
In your film, I do a lot of public speaking on Vietnam, and I know Vietnam well. And I tell people about things that like McNamara said, or Eisenhower said. And I'll say in Eisenhower's book, um, he talks about that if we allowed free elections to take place in Vietnam, that Ho Chi Minh would have won. So we violated the Geneva Accords that ended the war. What I was really doing in Vietnam was I was fighting against democracy. I went over there thinking I'd be fighting for democracy, but after I came home and studied history, I learned that we didn't want a communist government to be elected democratically, and we knew Ho Chi Minh would win, so we violated the accords, and we took Diem out of New Jersey, and we stuck him and made him president of a country that didn't really exist. And that's really important stuff.
You know, most of that history has been lost. You talk to young people today, our educational systems don't give it to them, the media doesn't give it to them, and one of my main concerns in doing the documentary is there's a conscious attempt to rewrite the history.
Well, part of the problem is that when I was in high school, American history was divided into two parts, from the beginning to 1865 and 1865 to present. At the end of the school year, we were just getting to Korea. We didn't finish Korea. We were just getting to it. The year was over. Now we've got 50 more years of history, and they shove that into that 50-minute class period. So you're shoving information in, other information comes out, and instead of having information that's concise enough for you to be able to read, understand, and really understand it, you get a paragraph about this war, a paragraph about that war. You don't get anything that you can put together that allows you to see the picture. Your film puts it together on Vietnam, and it allows you to see the picture. And more importantly to me is that instead of me saying Eisenhower said this or McNamara said this, in your film it shows them saying it. What could be more powerful than that? Nobody can say, when I'm saying it, people can say, oh, he doesn't know what he's talking about, he must be lying, you know. But when they see McNamara saying it, when they see those people, Eisenhower saying it, Johnson saying it, you can't question it. That's it. And what you've done is I really know Vietnam.
Right.
And you have footage that I have never seen. And you put it together in order of a timeline, which is how my brain works. So I'm so happy to have this. I want to get it into the high schools. I want them to understand, because still, even though we're in Iraq right now, if you learn the lessons of Vietnam, it helps you clearly see how bad Iraq is. So they're tied in. There's no different. Both wars were started by lies. Both wars are wars of occupation. In a war of occupation, when a soldier cannot tell the difference between the people who like him and the people that don't like him, what happens when you first go to war, it doesn't matter what your intentions are. When you see your friends getting killed and blown up, the intention becomes, and the mission becomes, getting me and my buddies home alive. That's the real mission in Iraq right now for those soldiers over there, getting their buddies home unhurt and alive. That becomes the mission. So when you can't tell who's trying to hurt you from who supports you, you err. And you're going to always err on the side of safety, err on the side of my guys aren't going to get hurt. So you heard from the testimony, they saw a woman walking with a bag, she was coming to them, they tried to make her stop, she didn't stop, they shot her, they killed her, turned out to be groceries. you know, and they gave multiple cases of that kind of stuff where they're erring on the side of safety for the Americans, and that's the nature of being in combat, the survival nature, and in the war of occupation where you can't tell the difference. What that means is the civilians were getting their asses kicked. And both Vietnam and Iraq was the same about that. So what happens is when you kill an innocent person, their spouse knows, their children know, their parents know, their co-workers know, and their friends know. And you make those people turn against you. So the harder that the Americans try to protect their buddies, and the more innocent people that get killed, you build the anti-occupation forces against you. That's the nature of occupation. So what's really happening here is the longer we stay, the more people will be against us, just because more innocent people are dying and people don't like that. It's really clear. The longer we stay, and the other thing that's really clear is when we left Vietnam, after 10 years, they did what they wanted.
Right.
When we leave Iraq, whether it's going to be tomorrow or 100 years like McCain says, they're going to do what the hell they want. Mm-hmm. So all the people that are going to die in between isn't going to change that. It doesn't make any sense. And so that's a lesson from Vietnam, that if it would have been learned, we wouldn't be in Iraq, and now we're repeating those same things in Iraq because the kids growing up don't get that education. That's why this film is so important.
Yeah, we need that education. We need to know what happened in the past. It seems to me that something else happened that ends up leading to atrocities in the war too. The soldiers on the ground, you're right. You know, you're there, you're young, you want to live out your life. You're going to do whatever you think you need to do to protect yourself, and that's understandable, and protect your buddies. But part of the logic of occupation is, you know, and I read this clearly in the Blackwater incident where 17 civilians were killed. Mm-hmm. You know, say there was a sniper up on the building. You know, the people who support that, they're opposed to our being there just as they were opposed to our being in Vietnam. So if Johnny goes up on the roof with a scope rifle, nobody says anything, right? And he takes a pop shot at a convoy, and then he disappears. If he's smart, he moves his position real quick. So you're left with the frustration of, you really can't, it's hard to get at the people you're fighting. They're fighting a guerrilla struggle. Just as in Vietnam, you know, the NLF might stage an attack and disappear into the jungle. So on the one hand, you have this rage, but at the lower level, but at the higher level, I think there's a command decision that says, you know, we'll use collective punishment. We'll show them every time there's an attack against us, more, whether it be Vietnamese or Iraqis, are going to die.
In the Marine Corps, I was taught that the duty of a Marine in combat is to destroy the will of the enemy to resist the authority of the United States of America. And you do that by making the price that they pay for their resistance higher than they can afford. And when they were talking about the rules of engagement yesterday, somebody standing on a roof with a cell phone, you're allowed to kill them. Well, damn, people go out of the house to get good reception. They get up on the roof to get good reception.
Right, yeah.
I mean, so, and the rules of engagement, as we learned yesterday, was about if you feel threatened.
And you're right. It just leads to continuing warfare. The logic doesn't work.
It's a downward spiral.
It is a downward spiral. You kill one guy up on the roof of a cell phone, he might be an insurgent calling in a strike, but more than likely, he's a civilian trying to get a clear signal. You know, now his brothers are in the insurgency.
Oh, you bet.
You know, now you killed one innocent person, or maybe you killed one insurgent, but still, now you've created more animosity, you've created more people to join the insurgents.
There's been testimony, and I saw the same thing in Vietnam, where once something bad has happened to a village in Vietnam, or something's happened in Iraq, that place that you didn't used to have problems, now you're going to have trouble. That's very clear. You got to be blind to not see that.
And you know, with Vietnam, especially as part of the revisionism of that, you hear a lot. Well, if the politicians would have just let us do our job, we could have won that war.
What you need to do is ask those people to define winning. What do you mean winning?
Right.
Kill everyone who doesn't agree with us? That's what they mean. Kill everyone who doesn't agree with us. Well, hell, I don't even agree with myself some of the times. I've changed my mind. I was for the war. I went there, then I became against it. You change your mind.
Yeah. What I'd like to tell people is we kill somewhere between 3 and 5 million Vietnamese. You want to stay there longer and kill 10 million Vietnamese? The problem will still be the same.
I didn't know that until I saw the clip of McNamara that you had in your film. It blew me away. Like, I studied this stuff. I know this stuff. I couldn't believe when he said, I think it was 3,400,000.
Right.
He gave an exact number, and it was bigger than any number I ever heard.
And this is a guy that had access to all the reports.
Well, he's the numbers guy.
Yeah, he's a numbers guy. So that's his job. So we can take that as a very accurate number. And of course, the Vietnamese, their own count is 5 million. And you think if the American people had that consciousness of how many people we killed in Vietnam, just if they had that number. Because we know how people feel about the Holocaust, or what the Nazis did, and other atrocities, you know, Pol Pot. But nobody thinks that America is capable of that kind of killing millions of innocent people. And if they knew that, I think they would not put up with this.
I think America, you have a little more faith in Americans than I do, because basically there's two kinds of killing. There's face-to-face killing, and there's remote control killing. A lot of those people in Vietnam were in North Vietnam, and they died from the bombing, continually bombing. And if a soldier shoots civilians, then he gets in trouble, sometimes.
Right.
If those same soldiers, My Lai is a perfect incident. Let's say that Lieutenant Calley was a B-52 pilot that flew over My Lai and killed those same exact people with the bombs. There'd be no stink about it at all. So for Americans, if it's a clean kill, if you will, to them it's not so bad. I would like, when people say who support the war in Vietnam, say, oh, those guys are lying, Winter Soldier. We didn't do those things in Vietnam. I'd like to ask them, of those 5 million people killed, how many do they say are non-combatants?
Right.
You know, how many of them were actual soldiers and how many were non-combatants?
Right.
You know, and if you have to remember, when the war started, it was the argument that only a minority of people support this communist. The majority of the people are for us. 5 million people is a lot of fucking people.
That's right.
So how many of them were the bad guys and how many of them were innocent? And what do you have to say about the ones that are innocent, besides collateral damage?
Right, yeah. To me, in a sense, I think they're all innocent, because I know if a foreign government came and invaded our country, tried to occupy my neighborhood, I would pick up a gun.
Of course you would.
What? I have the right to self-defense. And because I picked up a gun, I don't think that gives anybody the right to kill me. I know in the rules of law.
You're defending your home.
I'm defending my home.
In Florida, where I live, you come into a person's home, I can kill you.
Same thing in California. You cross the threshold of hostile intent, I have a right to defend my home. And that certainly doesn't change because a foreign government has invaded.
Well, let me say this. I clearly believe, with all of my heart, that regime change is called for in the United States. And I could list a million things. We have weapons of mass destruction. We unilaterally attack countries against international law. We imprison more of our own people than any other country in the world, not only by numbers per capita and by the actual numbers. 47 million people, the only Western nation that doesn't have health coverage for everyone. So there's plenty of reasons. We're the only Western nation with the death penalty. There's plenty of reasons to call for regime change in this country. But if we were invaded by China, as much as I hate Bush and all those fucking crooks that he surrounds himself with, and the Congress that all belongs in prison, it would not be acceptable to me for that change to come from foreign gun barrels.
Right, yeah.
Why would we think it would be acceptable to anyone else? And then let's say that they came here and they did that and they finally left. What do you think would happen to the Americans that were on their side? We need to kick their fucking ass.
That's right.
So when people talk about, oh, we can't leave Iraq because of what's going to happen, or we can't leave Vietnam because of what's going to happen there is the same thing that would happen here. They're traitors to your country. They sided with the foreign enemies.
That's right. Yeah.
So that's just how things work.
You know, there's a dictionary word that I want to repopularize. It's called Quislings.
Say it again.
Quislings. You know what Quisling is?
No, I don't.
It's, if you look at it, it's a small Q, it's Q, but Quisling was the guy that the Nazis put in charge of Norway when they invaded and occupied Norway during World War II.
Okay.
And he was seen as such a traitor to the Norwegian people that his name became generic in the dictionary. You can look it up in the dictionary for small Q for, you know, a national that goes over and supports the occupying government.
Tory.
Right, Tory, right, exactly. Right. So clearly it has negative connotations. And clearly it had negative connotations meant to be when the Nazis were occupying Norway or other places. But then you realize, hey, the people we've got in charge in Iraq are Quislings. The people we've got in charge in Afghanistan are Quislings. Even if they're well-intended, well-meaning, they crossed that line within their national, where they are seen as traitors. They are no use to anybody, and they can never establish any kind of stable government.
What we're doing in Iraq is counterproductive to what we say the goal is. To start with, under Saddam Hussein, people had running water, they had electricity, they had stores that were open, their kids could go to school, their wives could go shopping, people didn't get blown up. But if you were Al-Qaeda, you were fucked. If you were Hezbollah, you were fucked. If you were Islamic fundamentalist, you were fucked. So he had a country that didn't allow any of that stuff, and it stood up against Iran, which is Hezbollah.
Right.
And what we've done is we've destroyed that. And now the people are worse off than they were. Plus, it's a breeding ground for Hezbollah. It's a breeding ground for Al-Qaeda. It lets all of them in there, and it gives the Shiites, the Hezbollah Shiites in Iran, a country that is now their ally. So we've made them much stronger. It's crazy. It didn't make any sense. But we have to go to the panel, so we have to cut.
Yeah.